And the president does what he's told. And if they're going to put a rope around his neck and parade him through the streets and play music that he'll dance to, that's what he'll do. And so that's a position we're in. It's not very enviable. It's not only us, it's the entire world. And it's going to lead to no good end.
Mr. Chapman, is the U.S. dollar status as a world reserve currency threatened?
It's been threatened for a long time. When the U.S. went off the gold standard on August 15, 1971, they went for everything. The people behind the scenes grabbed everything they could get their hands on. They became absolutely filthy rich. And that's what going off the standard was all about. They destroyed a perfectly good system. And now it's been rent asunder. And in the final analysis, as I just said, their goal is for world government. And that really now is what it's all about. Plus, them continuing to get richer and more powerful and more in control, if you may. And we would call them criminals because they are. And that's the process that they're in. And I think what's going to happen worldwide is that there'll be revolutions in many countries, including the United States. And it's the only way they're going to get removed. And they're terrified of that because they know people like me are on the airways telling people these things. But that's the way it shapes up, and that's where we're all headed.
There's a rash of news stories about the Chinese proposals to develop an IMF-based reserve currency. Do you have any insight to that?
Well, that currency, the SDR, special drawing rights, has been around forever. You know, it was talked about at the UN in the early 1950s. It was brought into being in the late 1960s. They tried it. It doesn't work. And now they're bringing it back like an old dog with 3 legs. And it's just another subterfuge. And the other thing that they talk about to replace the dollar as a world currency is the basket of currencies. And that's not going to work either because none of them have any backing. The good faith and credit of any country it's not worth the paper it's written on. Because all countries spend more money than they've got coming in revenue. And they don't have any gold backing on their currencies. The only exception to that is the euro. And they started out with 15%. What they've got now, I don't know. But I guess it to be around 7%. But for all intents and purposes, there are no gold-backed currencies, so they can print money until the cows come home. And sure, the response to that will be a denigrated currency and a higher gold price. And that's why people go out and buy gold and silver coins and bullion and shares, because they realize what's going on. And less than 5% of the people in the world realize what's going on. And when 15 to 20% realize, gold and silver-related assets are going to go crazy. And that's not very far away. They've already done very well, and it's the only place to hide. The only place to hide your wealth. You can forget all the currencies because they're all fiat. Fiat means worthless. I mean, look at your money. It's issued by a private corporation by an act of Congress named the Federal Reserve. It's not part of the United States government. It's owned by international bankers. And they can create as much money as they want. And that's what they do. This past week they said, hey, U.S. Treasury needs some money. We're going to create $300 billion out of thin air. Here, Treasury, and the Treasury gives them bonds. Treasury spends the money, monetizing it, which means immediately inflationary. And then the Fed goes and takes the bonds and either lends them out or sells them in the market, creating even more inflation. So we're headed towards hyperinflation over the next 2 to 3 years. Inflation's already really 10%. You all know that in America. Someplace it's higher. And I questioned somebody who lives in Mexico City yesterday. I said, the government says inflation is 6.25%. And they danced around and talked about it, and they said, well, I don't know where it is, but it's between 10 and 15. So there you go. Why? Because they print money. More money than they have it coming in revenue. And that's what's happening. And it's going to continue to happen until all of those financial currencies collapse. And then they'll have a grand devaluation of all currencies in default. And that's in your future. So if you don't have gold and silver-related assets, you got a problem.
Mr. Chapman, there's a rumor here in Washington that Geithner's plan to salvage the banks has a big problem. The idea that's being circulated amongst some of the congressional staff is that Geithner is on his way to bankrupt the banks of the United States. Do you agree with that?
Well, he's there to save the anointed banks, banks that belong to his friends, and many of the rest of them will go under. And it's not only banks, it's brokerage houses, insurance companies. I mean, they're all in serious trouble. And they did this deliberately. They know they're supposed to not go out and lend 40 to 1 and 50 to 1, which they did. These are banks. Take risk, yes. Historically, banks have lent out for every dollar on deposit, $7 or $8. It's called fractional banking. The world has lived with it, and from time to time the system explodes. And that's what's happening right now.
With the devaluation of the American dollar against the Japanese, the Chinese, he put Japanese, but I'm assuming he means Chinese yang. Do you feel that come on, Doug, does Mr. Chapman feel that the Chinese are taking advantage of the low value properties and coming to America to invest the money from their factories? What's going to happen when they buy several homes here and then their goods that they're manufacturing in China aren't being accepted by any of the countries in the world? Like right at the present, there's a large amount of containers sitting loaded at the docks here in Liverpool, and there's no place to send them because there's no stores that need product because nobody's buying anything.
Well, the problem is the Chinese have a problem. And they're the ones who are the exporters.
No place to really send it.
Yeah, and they're terribly afraid that what's going to happen to those dollars is they're going to be worth a lot less. And there's nothing they can do about that. They've been conned. But on the other hand, they have deliberately kept the value of their currency down for a long, long time, making their goods cheap in the United States. And many other countries have been doing the same thing. And I think what's going to happen is they're going to start probably buying things in the United States as they have in other countries with their treasury bonds so that they at least will be out of the dollar, and maybe they'll buy manufacturing companies or natural resource companies, or maybe just land. Maybe they'll even buy foreclosed properties. I mean, commercial as well as residential. But I think that is coming because they've been doing that to buy properties in other parts of the world using U.S. treasuries. In other words, give us the right to develop this copper field here, because we need copper, and we'll give you $1 billion in U.S. treasuries. And so they not only are getting rid of the treasuries, they're participating in a valuable asset. And so I see China probably trying to go that way, but they've cheated all the way. And the reason the U.S. has never said anything about it is that because they were cheating, the goods were coming in to the U.S. cheap, and it kept inflation down. And at the same time, to keep the yuan cheap, they would print yuan